I trusted him with everything. My heart, my life, even my health insurance. But when he walked into that hospital with her and handed over my card with his name scratched off like I never mattered, I realized some betrayals cut deeper than words. This is the story of how I lost everything and found myself in the wreckage. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to this channel, hit that like button, and turn on notifications. Because stories like this, they're why we never stop fighting for our worth. The phone call that changed everything. The morning started like any other. Sunlight spilled through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow over the half-empty coffee cup in front of me. I barely had time to take a sip before my phone buzzed, an unknown number flashing on the screen. Normally, I'd let it go to voicemail, but something made me pick up. Mrs. Reynolds? A woman's voice, calm but clipped. Yes, this is Lisa Reynolds. I tucked the phone between my shoulder and ear, absently wiping a smudge of jam off the counter. This is Nurse Bennett from Memorial Hospital. Your husband, Mark Reynolds, is here with us. My hand froze mid-wipe. Is he okay? A pause. Too long. My stomach twisted. He's fine, she said quickly. But there's the situation. He's here, with another woman. She's listed as his emergency contact now. The words didn't make sense at first. Like hearing a sentence in a foreign language. Familiar sounds, no meaning. Then, slowly, the pieces clicked together. Another woman. Emergency contact. My fingers gripped the edge of the counter. What do you mean, another woman? Nurse Bennett hesitated. She's the one who checked him in. But here's the issue. They're using your insurance. Your card was presented. But, another pause. His name has been removed from it. A cold wave crashed over me. I'd heard of spouses cheating. Of lies. Of secret texts. Of late night work meetings. But this was something else. This wasn't just betrayal, it was erasure. I barely remembered hanging up. The next thing I knew, I was in my car, keys shaking in the ignition. The hospital was a 15-minute drive. 15 minutes to replay every red flag I'd ignored. 3 weeks earlier, I'd found a receipt in Mark's jacket pocket, a downtown hotel, a weekday, while he was supposedly at work. When I asked, he'd laughed, cupping my face like I was being silly. Client meetings, babe. You know how these things go. I'd wanted to believe him. That was the worst part. Then there were the late nights. The sudden gym sessions at odd hours. The way his phone was always face down now. But this? Walking into a hospital with her? Handing over my insurance card like I was nothing more than a policy number? The automatic doors of the ER slid open with a quiet whoosh. The smell of antiseptic hit me, sharp and sterile. My eyes scanned the waiting area, then locked onto them. Mark sat in one of those uncomfortable plastic chairs, his arm around a woman I'd never seen before. She was younger, mid-20s, with perfectly styled blonde hair and a designer handbag resting on her lap. Even in a hospital, she looked polished. And then I saw it. The doctor was holding out my insurance card, the one Mark and I had shared for years. Except now, where his name should have been, there was nothing. Just a jagged black line, like someone had taken a Sharpie and violently scratched him out of existence. Mark looked up. Our eyes met. For a split second, his face went pale. Then, just as quickly, his expression hardened. Like I was the one who'd done something wrong. The woman, Jasmine, I'd later learn, leaned into him, whispering something. He didn't pull away. That's when I knew. This wasn't just an affair. This was a replacement. And I was about to find out just how far he'd go to make sure I stayed erased. The woman in the waiting room. The fluorescent lights of the hospital hummed overhead, casting a sterile glow over the scene unfolding in front of me. My feet carried me forward before my brain could process what I was doing. Every step felt heavy, like I was wading through wet concrete. Mark stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the linoleum floor. Lisa, he said, his voice tight. This isn't what it looks like. A bitter laugh threatened to escape my throat. How many times had I heard that line in movies? How many times had I rolled my eyes at the cliché? And yet here it was, my real life, playing out like some bad daytime drama. I ignored him and turned to the woman still seated beside his empty chair. She had the decency to look uncomfortable, her manicured fingers twisting the strap of her purse. "Hi," I said, my voice eerily calm. "I'm Lisa, Mark's wife." Her eyes flickered to Mark, then back to me. "Jasmine," she murmured. The silence that followed was suffocating. I could feel the stares of the other people in the waiting room. The elderly man clutching his chest, the young mother rocking a crying baby, the bored receptionist pretending not to eavesdrop. They were all witnesses to this moment, to the unraveling of my marriage in a public hospital at 10:37 on a Tuesday morning. I held out my hand. "Can I see that?" Jasmine hesitated before passing me the insurance card. My fingers trembled as I traced the black marks where Mark's name used to be. The edges were ragged, like someone had done this in a hurry. Or in anger. "Why?" The word came out broken. Mark ran a hand through his hair, the way he always did when he was stressed. "It's just paperwork, Lisa. They needed her listed as my contact, and you couldn't use your own insurance?" I interrupted. "You had to deface mine?" Jasmine stood suddenly, her chair tipping backward. "I should go." "No." My hand shot out, gripping her wrist. "You should stay. Since you're apparently important enough to replace me on legal documents, you should hear this too." Mark's jaw clenched. "You're making a scene?" That did it. The dam broke. "A scene?" My voice rose, echoing off the tiled walls. "You bring your mistress to the hospital, use my insurance like I'm some faceless benefactor, and I'm making a scene?" The receptionist was definitely watching now. So was the security guard by the door. Jasmine tugged her arm free. "I'm not his mistress." The way she said it, so sure, so defensive, made my blood run cold. Because there was only one reason a woman would correct me like that. Only one reason she'd be so quick to clarify. I looked at Mark. Really looked at him. At the way his shoulders tensed. At the guilt flickering behind his eyes. At the wedding band he still wore. Even now. Oh my God. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. She's not your mistress. She's your wife. The words hung in the air between us, ugly and undeniable. Mark opened his mouth, then closed it again. His silence was answer enough. Jasmine reached into her bag and pulled out a small velvet box. When she flipped it open, I saw the ring, a perfect diamond solitaire, nearly identical to the one sitting on my own finger. "We got married last month," she said softly. "In Vegas." The floor tilted beneath me. Last month? Last month we'd celebrated our 7-year anniversary. Last month he'd brought me roses and taken me to my favorite restaurant. Last month he'd made love to me and whispered forever against my skin. Security was moving toward us now, alerted by the commotion. But all I could see was Mark's face, the man I'd built a life with, the man who'd held my hand through miscarriages and job losses and the death of my father. The man who'd apparently been living a double life. "You bigamous son of a bitch," I breathed. Then everything went black. The last thing I heard before I hit the ground was Mark shouting my name. The irony wasn't lost on me. Even now, at my weakest moment, he still knew how to pretend he cared. Waking up to a different life. The first thing I registered was the smell, antiseptic and stale coffee. Then came the pain, a dull throb radiating from the back of my skull. When I forced my eyes open, the harsh fluorescent lights made me wince. "Easy there." A nurse with kind eyes and a name tag reading Diane adjusted the pillow behind me. "You took quite a spill." Memories flooded back in jagged fragments. The hospital. Mark. Jasmine. The velvet ring box. My knees buckled as the truth knocked the air from my lungs. Literally. "Where?" My throat felt raw, like I'd been screaming. "Still in ER," Diane said, checking my IV. "You've been out about 20 minutes. Doctor wants to keep you for observation given the head trauma." She hesitated. "Your husband has been asking about you." The word, husband, tasted like ash in the sterile air. I turned my head toward the curtains separating my bed from the rest of the emergency room. Through the thin fabric, I could see two silhouettes standing close together, One tall and broad-shouldered, Mark, the other petite with the outline of perfect salon hair, Jasmine. Their whispered argument carried through the gap. "Told you this would happen," Jasmine hissed. "Now what? You think they're not going to check her insurance after she collapsed?" Mark's response was too low to hear. Whatever he said made Jasmine throw up her hands. The motion sent a waft of expensive perfume through the curtain, something floral and cloying that made my empty stomach churn. Diane followed my gaze, her lips pressing into a thin line. "I can have security remove them if you'd like." The offer hung between us. All I had to do was say yes, and they'd be gone. But something sharper than heartbreak pulsed through me now, a cold, calculating fury that made my fingers curl into the stiff hospital sheets. "No," I said slowly. "I want to talk to them. Alone." Diane looked skeptical but nodded, pulling the curtain back with a metallic rattle. Mark spun toward me, his face a mask of manufactured concern. "Lisa, thank God you're..." "Save it." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "We're way past the concerned husband act." Jasmine hovered behind him, clutching that damn designer purse like a shield. Up close, I could see she was younger than I'd first thought, mid-20s at most. Her engagement ring caught the light as she fidgeted, the diamond throwing prismatic spots across the ceiling. Mark ran a hand through his already disheveled hair. "Let me explain. You married her." I stated it flatly, watching us flinch with detached satisfaction. "While still legally married to me. That's not just cheating, Mark. That's fraud." The heart monitor beeped louder as my pulse spiked. Jasmine's eyes darted to the machine, then to Mark's face. I saw the exact moment realization dawned on her. The slight parting of her glossy lips, the way her manicured nails dug into his arm. "You said you were divorced," she whispered. A muscle in Mark's jaw twitched. "It's complicated." The laugh that burst from my chest sounded unhinged even to me. "Complicated? You took out a marriage license under false pretenses. That's a felony in Nevada." My medical training kicked in as I recognized the pallor creeping across Jasmine's face. "Oh, sweetheart. He didn't tell you that part, did he?" Mark stepped between us. "Lisa, please. Let's see." I ticked points off on trembling fingers. Bigamy invalidates both marriages. Means any assets acquired during the fraudulent union could be contested. I locked eyes with Jasmine, including that rock on your finger. Jasmine made a small, wounded noise. Mark reached for her, but she jerked away, the purse strap snapping against his wrist. "You told me the papers were finalized." Her voice climbed an octave. "You said she was getting alimony, and..." "Wait." I sat up straighter, ignoring the wave of dizziness. "Alimony." The monitor's beeping became erratic as the pieces clicked together. The altered insurance card. The rushed Vegas wedding. The way Mark had been working late so often these past months. "You were trying to establish a separation date," I realized aloud. "So when we inevitably divorced, you could claim we'd been living apart longer. Reduce your financial obligations." Mark's silence confirmed everything. I'd seen this same calculating expression during our first year of marriage when he negotiated his way out of a speeding ticket by charming the female officer. Back then, I'd found it impressive. Now it made my skin crawl. Jasmine backed toward the door, her face a mask of dawning horror. I have to." The curtain whipped open as she fled. Mark hesitated, torn between us, the wife he'd betrayed and the wife he'd illegally acquired. The choice should have hurt more. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Pity. "Go after her," I said quietly. "We both know you can't afford to lose your alibi." For one terrifying second, I thought he might actually stay, that he might try to explain or apologize. But then his shoulders slumped, and he followed Jasmine without another word. The heart monitor's steady beep marked the seconds until Diane returned, her eyebrows raised. "Everything okay?" I reached for the plastic cup of water on my tray, noting with clinical interest that my hands no longer shook. "Better than okay." The water was lukewarm and tasted faintly of plastic. "Could you call the billing department? I need to verify what insurance was used for my admission today." Because if Mark had committed fraud with our health coverage too, that gave me leverage. And after 7 years of marriage, I knew exactly how my husband responded to leverage. The game had changed. And for the first time since walking into this hospital, I held all the cards. Paper trails and betrayals. The hospital billing office smelled like printer toner and stale coffee. I sat across from a tired-looking woman named Gloria, whose nameplate read, Patient Financial Services. She peered at me over her bifocals as I slid the altered insurance card across the desk. Mrs. Reynolds, you understand this is highly irregular, she said, turning the card over in her hands. The black marks where Mark's name had been scratched out looked even more violent under the office's harsh lighting. I just need to know if this was used for any treatments today, I said, keeping my voice steady. Particularly for my husband or... The words stuck in my throat. Or the woman he arrived with. Gloria's fingers flew across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. The computer screen reflected in her glasses, a blur of codes and numbers I couldn't decipher. Then her typing slowed. Stopped. Well, she said carefully, this insurance card was indeed used today. But not for Mr. Reynolds. She adjusted her glasses. It was used for a Jasmine Whitmore prenatal visit. The air left my lungs in a rush. Prenatal. The word echoed in the sudden silence of my mind, each syllable sharper than the last. How far along? The question came out mechanically, like someone else was speaking through me. Gloria's expression softened. 12 weeks, according to the records. 3 months. Mark had been living a double life for at least 3 months. Long enough to get another woman pregnant. Long enough to marry her. All while sharing my bed, my home, my life. I became aware of Gloria watching me, waiting for my reaction. I forced my numb fingers to unclench from the edge of her desk. Can you print those records for me? The insurance claims? That's protected health inform. Under HIPAA, I have a right to any records tied to my insurance policy. I interrupted. The legal jargon tasted bitter on my tongue. Mark had taught me this during his own insurance fraud case last year. The irony wasn't lost on me. Gloria hesitated, then hit print. The machine whirred to life, spitting out pages that felt heavier than they should when she handed them to me. The dates told their own story. Doctor visits every 2 weeks since March. Ultrasounds. Blood work. All billed to my insurance. All with my name listed as primary subscriber. The most recent claim, today's visit, included a charge for genetic testing. Mark wasn't just planning a future with Jasmine. He was building a family. I folded the papers with deliberate care, tucking them into my purse next to the discharge papers from my own hospital stay. The motion reminded me of the bandage on my forearm, where the 4 had been the physical proof of my collapse. One more thing, I said as I stood. Can you tell me if there were any other claims under my policy? Maybe dental? Vision. Gloria returned to her keyboard. The printer woke again, producing a single page. Just one. A routine cleaning last month at Bright Smiles Dentistry. 4. She trailed off, her eyes darting to mine. Let me guess, I said flatly. Jasmine Whitmore. Gloria nodded, her lips pressed into a sympathetic line. The walk back through the hospital corridors felt surreal. Every pregnant woman I passed sent a fresh jolt through me, the rounded bellies, the protective hands resting on them, the partners hovering close. Had Mark looked at Jasmine that way? Had he pressed his palm to her stomach the way he'd once done with mine during our brief, heartbreaking pregnancy? My phone buzzed in my pocket. Mark's name flashed on the screen, followed by 3 pulsing dots indicating an incoming text. I stared at it until the screen went dark. The parking garage was nearly empty when I reached my car. I sat there for a long moment, the printed records spread across the passenger seat like evidence at a crime scene. Then I pulled out my phone and did something I should have done weeks ago. I called my brother, the divorce attorney. Lisa? David answered on the second ring. You okay? You sound. I need you to run a marriage license search. I cut in. Clark County, Nevada. Last month. A pause. Then, oh shit. Mark. And a property records check. See if he's bought or leased anything recently. My voice didn't sound like my own, cold and methodical, like I was discussing someone else's life. David exhaled sharply. I'm on it. Where are you now? I looked down at the damning papers beside me, at the proof of my husband's meticulously planned betrayal. Putting together Exhibit A. The engine roared to life when I turned the key. In the rear-view mirror, the hospital grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared from view. Just like my marriage. Just like the woman I'd been when I walked in there this morning. The GPS calculated the route automatically, 3 miles to the bank where Mark and I held our joint accounts. 4 miles to our marital home. 12 miles to the courthouse where I would file an emergency motion to freeze our assets. I adjusted the mirror, meeting my own gaze. The woman staring back at me was different, harder, angrier, but finally, blessedly clear-eyed. Mark had made his plans. Now it was time to make mine. The other woman's story. Rain pounded against the windshield as I pulled up to the address David had texted me, a sleek high-rise apartment building on the nicer side of town. The kind of place with a doorman and a gym with Peloton bikes. The kind of place Mark's salary couldn't afford without dipping into our joint savings. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, watching the building's entrance through the downpour. My phone buzzed with another update from David. Marriage certificate confirmed. Vegas, April 15th. Also found lease agreement for apartment, signed same day. Lisa, he used your credit for the security deposit. The words blurred as my vision tunneled. April 15th. Our 7-year anniversary. While I'd been waiting at our favorite restaurant with a wrapped gift in my lap, Mark had been in Nevada saying vows to another woman. Movement at the building's entrance snapped me back to the present. Jasmine stepped out under the awning, shielding her eyes against the rain as she hailed a cab. She wore different clothes than at the hospital. Yoga pants and an oversized sweater that did little to hide the slight curve of her stomach. I moved without thinking. My car door slammed behind me as I crossed the street, rain soaking through my clothes in seconds. Jasmine. She spun around, her eyes widening when she recognized me. The cab pulled up beside her, its windshield wipers slapping rhythmically. I have nothing to say to you, she said, reaching for the door handle. 12 weeks along, right? The words stopped her cold. That puts conception right around Valentine's Day. How romantic. Her hand dropped from the cab door. The driver gave an impatient honk before driving off, leaving us standing in the rain. You followed me? Her voice shook. I followed my money. I wiped rainwater from my face. Turns out my husband's been spending it on 2 households. 2 wives. Jasmine's face crumpled. I didn't know. Not at first. She glanced around nervously. Can we not do this here? 5 minutes later, we sat in a nearby coffee shop, steam rising from untouched mugs between us. Jasmine cradled her stomach absently, a gesture that sent a fresh wave of pain through me. He told me you were separated, she began. Said the divorce was amicable, just waiting on paperwork. Her fingers traced the rim of her cup. I believed him because he had proof, separate bank accounts, nights apart. He even showed me divorce filings. I snorted. Let me guess, drafts he never submitted? She nodded miserably. By the time I found out the truth, I was already. Her hand drifted to her stomach again. The pieces clicked together. That's why the rushed wedding. He needed to legitimize the baby before anyone realized the dates didn't add up. Jasmine's silence confirmed it. I studied her face, the smudged mascara, the bitten lips. She wasn't the homewrecker I'd imagined. Just another victim of Mark's carefully constructed lies. You should know, I said slowly, he's been using my insurance for your prenatal care. That's insurance fraud. Her face went pale. Oh, God. There's more. I pulled out my phone, showing her the lease agreement David had sent. See that signature? He forged mine as co-signer. Jasmine made a small, wounded noise. For a moment, we just sat there, 2 women bound together by the same man's betrayal. What happens now? She finally asked. I pushed my coffee away. Now you have a choice. You can keep living his lies, or you can help me expose them. Outside, the rain slowed to a drizzle. Somewhere beyond the clouds, the sun was still shining. It would find its way through eventually, just like the truth. Jasmine reached for her purse with trembling hands. "Tell me what you need." The paper trail of deceit. The printer in David's office hummed relentlessly, spitting out page after page of financial records. I watched as each sheet landed in the growing pile, every one a fresh indictment of Mark's double life. David stabbed a finger at the most recent printout. "This is the smoking gun. 2 days after your anniversary, he withdrew $15,000 from your joint savings under home repairs." He flipped to another page. "That same afternoon, a $14,800 deposit into a new account under just his name." I traced the numbers with my fingertip, the ink smudging slightly under my touch. The withdrawal date glared up at me, April 17th, 2 days after his Vegas wedding. While I'd been at work, believing our money was safe, Mark had been setting up his new life. "There's more," David continued. He opened a spreadsheet on his laptop. "In the past 6 months, Mark's made 17 ATM withdrawals at or near this address." He turned the screen toward me, showing a map with cluster reds around Jasmine's apartment building. The receipts told a story in reverse: dinners at the Italian place down her street, charges at a baby boutique, even a payment to a couple's massage spa. Each transaction painted a clearer picture of the parallel life he'd been living. I reached for the most damning document, the forged lease agreement. My forged signature stared back at me, a clumsy imitation that somehow looked convincing enough to pass. How did I miss this? The question came out hollow. David hesitated before answering. "He counted on you trusting him, on being too busy with your nursing shifts to check every statement." A knock at the office door interrupted us. Jasmine stood in the doorway, her face drawn. She clutched a manila envelope to her chest like a shield. "I brought what you asked for," she said quietly. David gave me a questioning look. When I nodded, he stood. "I'll give you two some privacy." The envelope contained photographs, dozens of them, printed from what appeared to be Jasmine's phone. Our kitchen table became a gallery of Mark's deceit, selfies of them in front of the Bellagio fountains, receipts from their honeymoon suite, even ultrasound images with Mark's handwriting in the margins. Our little miracle. The most painful one showed Mark with his hand on Jasmine's barely showing stomach, grinning at the camera with the same proud dad expression he'd worn during our own brief pregnancy. Jasmine watched me sort through the evidence, her hands twisting in her lap. "He told me you couldn't have children. Said that's why the divorce was so amicable, no custody battles." The lie cut deep. Our miscarriage had nearly destroyed us. Mark had held me for hours as I sobbed, whispering promises that we'd try again. Now I understood why he'd suddenly changed his mind about fertility treatments last fall. I set the photos aside, focusing on the practical. "Did he ever give you anything in writing? Emails or texts about his plans?" Jasmine pulled out her phone. "Just these." She opened a text thread with Mark from 2 weeks ago. "Mark, once the baby comes, we'll file for full separation from Lisa. With the new job in Chicago, the courts won't have jurisdiction. Mark, don't worry about insurance. Her policy covers us through year-end. Mark, and babe, destroy these messages." My blood ran cold. Chicago. A new job. He'd been planning to disappear with her and the baby, leaving me holding the bag for his fraud. David returned with 3 cups of coffee, taking in the spread of evidence on the table. "This is better than I hoped." He picked up one of the ultrasound images. "With this plus the financials, we've got him on fraud, forgery, bigamy, and insurance fraud," Jasmine added quietly. "For the prenatal visits." David raised an eyebrow at me. I gave a small nod. "We'd discuss our cooperation later." As we organized the documents into piles, a strange calm settled over me. The pain was still there, a raw wound beneath my ribs, but it no longer controlled me. Each piece of paper, each photograph, each text message was another stitch closing that wound. I picked up the last document, a printout of Mark's upcoming job interview in Chicago. Monday, 10 a.m. 3 days from now. David followed my gaze. "We could have him served before he even gets on the plane." I ran my finger along the edge of the paper, considering. Then I shook my head.
No.
Let him go to the interview. Both David and Jasmine stared at me. If he gets the job, I explained, it proves intent to establish residency in another state. That's crossing state lines with fraudulent financial motives. I met David's eyes. That's federal, isn't it? A slow smile spread across my brother's face. Lisa Reynolds, I do believe you're trying to get your husband arrested by the FBI. I stacked the papers neatly, aligning their edges until they formed a perfect rectangle of betrayal. No, I said softly. I'm just making sure he faces the consequences of his choices. Outside, the sun dipped below the skyline, casting long shadows across our paper trail of evidence. By this time tomorrow, Mark would walk into a storm he didn't see coming. And for the first time in months, I found myself looking forward to Monday. The interview. Monday morning dawned with an unseasonable chill. I stood at my kitchen window, watching the sunrise paint the Chicago skyline in pale gold. My flight had landed 2 hours earlier, plenty of time to settle into the coffee shop across from the sleek downtown office building where Mark's interview was scheduled. The borrowed FBI badge weighed heavily in my pocket. Not real, of course. David had connections at a prop studio, but convincing enough at a glance. The rest of our plan relied on something far more powerful than fake credentials, Mark's own arrogance. At 9:15 a.m., right on schedule, Mark stepped out of a taxi. He looked every inch the successful professional in his navy suit and polished shoes, the same ones I'd picked out for him last Christmas. His briefcase swung at his side, undoubtedly filled with fraudulent references, listing our marital home as his address. I lifted my phone and snapped a photo as he entered the building, sending it to David with one word: go time. Then I waited. The coffee shop's clock ticked loudly. 9:30, 9:45. At 10:02, my phone buzzed with a text from Jasmine. He just called me from the interview waiting room. Sounds confident. I sipped my now cold coffee, imagining Mark sitting in some HR office, charming the recruiters with the same easy smile that had once charmed me. Would he mention his wife? Show them the wedding band he still wore? The thought made my stomach churn. At 10:17, the plan shifted into motion. A black SUV pulled up outside the office building. 2 men in dark suits emerged, real federal agents, courtesy of the insurance fraud report David had filed. My hands trembled as I watched them enter the building. 23 agonizing minutes later, the glass doors slid open again. Mark walked out flanked by the agents, his face ashen. One of the men was speaking calmly, gesturing toward the SUV. Mark's head swiveled frantically, his eyes scanning the street like he might bolt. That's when I stepped out of the coffee shop. Our eyes met across the busy sidewalk. Mark's mouth fell open in perfect shock. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to just us, the betrayed and the betrayer, frozen in this moment of reckoning. Then, he did something I didn't expect. He smiled. Lisa. His voice carried across the distance, falsely warm. Honey, thank God you're here. There's been some terrible misunderstanding. The agents turned to look at me. One raised an eyebrow. You know this man, ma'am? Mark was already moving toward me, his expression the picture of relieved husband. This is my wife. She'll tell you. I'm his first wife, I said clearly, pulling out the marriage certificate David had procured. He married another woman last month without divorcing me first. Mark's smile died. The agents exchanged glances. One reached for his handcuffs. Mr. Reynolds, you have the right to remain silent. As the Miranda rights washed over him, Mark's eyes never left mine. The confusion in them hardened into something else, understanding, then fury. He knew now. Knew I'd orchestrated this. You bitch, he hissed as the agents guided him toward the SUV. You'll regret this. One of the agents shot him a warning look. Sir, I'd advise you. But I interrupted, stepping closer.
No, Mark.
The only one who's going to regret anything is you. I reached into my bag and pulled out the ultrasound photo, holding it up so he could see. 12 weeks along. Did you really think you could hide a whole family from me? The color drained from his face. For the first time in our 7 years together, Mark Reynolds looked truly speechless. The agents loaded him into the SUV. Through the tinted window, I watched him slump forward, his head in his hands. It should have felt like victory. Instead, I just felt tired. My phone buzzed. David. Got him on recording admitting to the forged lease. FBI is ecstatic. I took one last look at the SUV pulling away, then turned toward the train station. The morning sun felt warm on my face, the city noises loud and alive around me. Somewhere above, a plane traced a white line across the blue sky, the same skies Mark had planned to escape under. As I walked away, I realized something surprising. I didn't hate him anymore. The anger that had fueled me these past days had burned out, leaving only ashes and clarity. Mark's choices had brought him here. And mine, the choice to fight back, to stand up, to refuse to be erased, those had brought me somewhere new entirely. The train station loomed ahead, its schedule board flipping destinations. I checked my ticket, one way. No return trip needed. Somewhere behind me, a clock tower struck noon. The sound echoed through the streets, marking not just the hour, but the turning of a page. My phone buzzed again. Jasmine this time. Thank you, the message read. For both of us. I tucked the phone away without replying. There would be time for forgiveness later. For now, there was only forward motion, one step, then another, carrying me toward whatever came next. The aftermath. The courthouse steps were colder than I expected. I sat with my hands folded in my lap, watching people come and go. Lawyers in sharp suits, nervous couples holding hands, bailiffs smoking hurried cigarettes between hearings. The autumn wind bit through my jacket, but I didn't move. I needed to feel something real, something raw. David emerged through the heavy doors, his tie slightly loosened. He sank down beside me, with a sigh that told me everything before he spoke. It's done, he said, handing me a thick envelope. Full dissolution of marriage, all assets frozen pending investigation, and... He hesitated. Mark's being charged with bigamy, fraud, and forgery. The FBI picked up the insurance fraud case, too. I traced the embossed seal on the envelope with my thumb. 7 years of marriage reduced to legal jargon and a wax stamp. How did he look? The question slipped out before I could stop it. David's jaw tightened. Like a man who just realized he's not as smart as he thought. He pulled out his phone, showing me a photo of Mark in an orange jumpsuit. Bail hearings tomorrow, but with the federal charges. I didn't need him to finish. Mark wouldn't be walking out of custody anytime soon. We sat in silence for a while, watching pigeons fight over a discarded pretzel. The weight of everything that had happened pressed down on me, the lies, the betrayal, the sheer audacity of Mark's double life. But beneath it all, there was something else. Relief. Jasmine reached out. I said finally. She's moving back to her parents' place in Ohio. David side-eyed me. You're not actually feeling sorry for her, are you? I thought about the ultrasound photo, about the way Jasmine's hands had trembled when she handed over evidence against Mark. She was just another one of his victims, just younger and more naive. The wind picked up, scattering leaves across the courthouse plaza. David stood, offering me his hand. Come on, let's get lunch. There's someone you should meet. The restaurant was one of those trendy farm-to-table places Mark would have hated. Too expensive, not enough steak options. The thought almost made me smile. David led me to a corner booth where a woman with sharp green eyes and a no-nonsense ponytail stood to greet me. Lisa? I'm Amanda Carter, federal prosecutor on your husband's case. Her handshake was firm, her gaze assessing. We ordered salads, another thing Mark would have complained about, and Amanda got straight to business. We're building an ironclad case, she said between bites of arugula. But we need your testimony, specifically about the insurance fraud and the forged lease. I twirled my fork, watching the dressing pool at the bottom of the bowl. What happens to Jasmine and the baby in all this? Amanda's expression softened slightly. That's actually why I wanted to meet. We've offered her immunity in exchange for testimony. She'll keep her medical coverage through state programs. She leaned forward. But this only works if we're all on the same page. David nudged my foot under the table. It's your call, Lisa. I thought about the future, Mark in prison, me finally free, Jasmine raising a child who would one day ask about his father. The choices we make ripple outward in ways we can't predict. I'll testify, I said. Amanda nodded like she'd expected nothing less. She pulled out a business card and slid it across the table. Trial starts in 3 months. Until then. She hesitated. You might consider therapy. These cases can get ugly. I pocketed the card without looking at it. The truth was I'd already made an appointment. Not because Amanda suggested it, but because I owed it to myself, to the woman I'd been before Mark and the woman I was becoming after him. As we left the restaurant, David slung an arm around my shoulders. Proud of you, sis. The sun broke through the clouds just then, warm on my face. For the first time in months, I breathed easy. The legal battles weren't over. The wounds weren't fully healed, but I was moving forward. And Mark? He was exactly where he'd put himself. My phone buzzed with a notification. The real estate agent sending photos of a cute bungalow near the hospital where I'd just been hired. A fresh start in every sense of the word. I showed David the listing. Think I should make an offer? He grinned. Only if it has good locks. I laughed, a real, genuine laugh that startled us both. The sound carried down the street, mingling with the city noises, becoming part of the world again. Somewhere, a clock struck 3. Time kept moving. And so would I. The first day of the rest. The key turned smoothly in the lock of my new bungalow, the sound crisp and final. I stepped across the threshold, my footsteps echoing against the bare, hardwood floors. The movers had come and gone, leaving boxes stacked like uneven building blocks in each room. Sunlight streamed through the bay window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. I set down the last box labeled Lisa, bedroom, and ran my fingers along the windowsill, feeling the slight ridge where the wood had warped over time. Imperfect. Real. Mine. My phone buzzed on the counter. David checking in. You alive over there? I sent back a photo of the chaos. Boxes, bare walls, the single piece of furniture I'd bought for myself, a butter-yellow armchair that would have clashed horribly with Mark's minimalist aesthetic. His reply came instantly. Looks like freedom. I was peeling tape off a kitchen box when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Jasmine standing on my porch, shifting nervously from foot to foot. She held a bakery box in one hand and what looked like a houseplant in the other. The door creaked as I opened it. We stood there for a beat, 2 women who should have been strangers, but were forever linked by the same man's betrayal. I know I should have called, she started, then stopped. Her baby bump was more pronounced now, stretching the fabric of her sundress. I just wanted to bring you something. For your new place. She thrust the gifts toward me. The bakery box smelled of cinnamon and sugar. The plant was a peace lily, its dark green leaves glossy with health. I stepped aside. Come in. The house was too warm, the air conditioning not yet installed. Jasmine perched on the edge of my yellow armchair while I unpacked the bakery box. Apple turnovers, still warm. I'm moving to Ohio next week, she said, accepting the plate I handed her. My parents found me an OBGYN there. I studied her over my coffee cup. She looked younger in the daylight, barely out of college. How are you feeling? Her hand went instinctively to her stomach. Terrified. Excited. A pause. Angry sometimes. The honesty surprised me. We ate in silence for a moment, the flaky pastry crumbling between our fingers. I got a letter from Mark, she said suddenly. From jail. My fingers stilled. What did it say? She pulled a folded paper from her purse and handed it to me without a word. The handwriting was unmistakably Mark's, the same looping letters that had written me love notes early in our relationship. But the tone was different. Demanding. Entitled. Instructions about how Jasmine should testify, what she should say to protect him. I handed it back, my fingers leaving powdered sugar smudges on the corners. He never changes, does he? Jasmine refolded the letter with precise movements. I'm not sending a reply. Something unclenched in my chest. We weren't friends. We'd never be friends. But in that moment, I recognized a kindred spirit. Another woman learning to stand up to Mark Reynolds. She stood to leave as the afternoon light began to fade. At the door, she hesitated. For what it's worth. I'm sorry. I thought about the ultrasound photo, about the life growing inside her that would always connect us in some way. Me too. After she left, I placed the peace lily in the bay window where it would get morning light. The apple turnovers sat half-eaten on the counter, their sweetness lingering in the air. One by one, I began unpacking the boxes, my books, my clothes, the few pieces of kitchenware I'd claimed in the divorce. Each item felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that had been lost. When only one box remained marked Misk in hasty Sharpie, I took a deep breath before opening it. Inside were the remnants of my old life. Wedding photos, anniversary cards, the embroidered handkerchief my mother had given me to carry down the aisle. I carried the box outside to the backyard, where the previous owners had left a fire pit. The match hissed as I struck it, the flame dancing in the twilight. One by one, I let the mementos burn. The photos curled and blackened, the cards turned to ash, the handkerchief smoldered like a dying star. When the fire burned low, I pressed my bare hands into the cool grass and looked up at the first evening stars. Somewhere out there, Mark sat in a jail cell. Jasmine packed for Ohio. David probably stressed over some new case. And me? I was here. In this imperfect house with its warped windowsills, surrounded by boxes and possibilities. The peace lily watched from the window as I went inside, the door clicking shut behind me. Tomorrow I would hang curtains, buy groceries, maybe plant something in that bare patch of backyard. But tonight? Tonight was just for me. I curled up in my yellow armchair, the one Mark would have hated, and watched moonlight paint silver patterns across my new floors. The house settled around me, creaking softly, as if welcoming me home. The trial. The courthouse steps were slick with rain on the morning of Mark's trial. I stood under my black umbrella, watching droplets race down the marble banister. 3 months had passed since that day in Chicago. 3 months of therapy sessions, of learning to sleep alone in my new home, of quiet evenings spent rediscovering the person I was before I became Mrs. Reynolds. David materialized at my side, his suit jacket dark with moisture. Ready? I wasn't. But I nodded anyway. The courtroom smelled of lemon polish and stale coffee. Mark sat at the defense table, his once confident posture diminished, in an ill-fitting suit. His eyes found mine immediately, that same piercing gaze that used to make my stomach flutter. Now it just made my fingers tighten around my purse strap. Jasmine was already seated in the front row, her baby bump prominent beneath a loose maternity dress. She gave me a small, nervous smile when I sat beside her. We didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. The bailiff called the court to order, and the trial began. Prosecutor Amanda Carter laid out the case with surgical precision. Bank records showing the stolen $15,000, the forged lease agreement with my fabricated signature, the damning text messages between Mark and Jasmine about evading jurisdiction. When my turn came to testify, my palms left damp prints on the wooden railing as I swore to tell the truth. Amanda's questions were gentle but firm. Mrs. Reynolds, when did you first realize your husband had married another woman? The words still tasted bitter. When I saw our health insurance card with his name removed, he'd used it to pay for his new wife's prenatal care. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Mark's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. Jurors exchanged glances. One woman in the box, a grandmotherly type with silver hair, looked at Mark like he was something unpleasant she'd stepped in. The most damning moment came when Jasmine took the stand. Her voice shook as she described how Mark had lied about our divorce, how he'd pressured her to delete incriminating texts. When Amanda played the recording of Mark admitting to the forged lease, several jurors actually leaned forward in their seats. Mark's defense was pathetic. His lawyer argued it was all a misunderstanding, that Mark had believed our marriage was effectively over. But when Amanda displayed side-by-side photos, Mark kissing me at our anniversary dinner in April, then his Vegas wedding certificate dated 2 days later, even the judge looked disgusted. The verdict came faster than anyone expected. Guilty on all counts: bigamy, fraud, forgery. The federal charges would be handled separately, but the judge made it clear Mark was facing serious time. As bailiffs led him away in handcuffs, Mark turned to me one last time. His lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear over the courtroom noise. Maybe an apology. Maybe a curse. It didn't matter anymore. Outside, the rain had stopped. Sunlight broke through the clouds, glinting off the wet pavement. David squeezed my shoulder. It's over. Jasmine lingered near the courthouse steps, one hand resting on her stomach. We looked at each other across the crowded sidewalk, two women bound together by betrayal, by loss, by the life growing inside her that would always connect us. She nodded once before turning away, disappearing into the crowd. David offered to take me to lunch, but I declined. There was somewhere else I needed to be. The cemetery was quiet in the afternoon light. I knelt before the small headstone I'd avoided for years, the one marked Baby Reynolds. The grass was cool beneath my knees as I placed two items on the grave, a copy of the divorce decree and the ultrasound photo of Jasmine's baby. "I'm sorry I stayed with him after we lost you," I whispered. The wind carried my words away, but the weight in my chest lifted just the same. When I stood, the sun warmed my face. Somewhere beyond the cemetery gates, life continued. Cars honking, children laughing, the ordinary noise of the world moving forward. My phone buzzed as I reached my car. The hospital administrator confirming my start date for the nursing position I'd accepted. A fresh start in the maternity ward, helping new lives enter the world. I sent a quick reply, then turned the key in the ignition. The engine purred to life, ready for whatever came next. And for the first time in a long time, so was I. The letter. The first snowfall of winter dusted my windshield as I pulled into the hospital parking lot before dawn. 6 weeks had passed since the trial, and life had settled into a new rhythm. Early shifts in labor and delivery, quiet evenings in my yellow armchair, weekends spent turning my bungalow into a home. The mail slot in the hospital break room clattered as I poured my first coffee of the day. A stack of envelopes fanned across the linoleum, mostly medical journals and insurance notices. But one envelope stopped me cold. Prison return address. Mark's cramped handwriting spelling my name. My fingers trembled as I turned it over. The postmark showed it had been sent weeks ago, likely delayed in some bureaucratic limbo. The weight felt wrong. Too thick for just a letter. Nurse Diane poked her head in, her cheerful greeting dying when she saw my face. "Everything okay?" I shoved the envelope in my locker.
"Fine.
Just need caffeine before my shift." But the letter burned in my thoughts through 3 deliveries, 2 routine, 1 emergency C-section that left my scrubs splattered and my hands shaking for entirely different reasons. When my lunch break finally came, I retreated to an empty on-call room and tore open the envelope. A folded legal document slid out first, Mark's appeal notice. Beneath it, pages of handwritten scrawl on prison stationery. The ink bled in places where he'd pressed too hard. "Lisa," it began, "I know you don't want to hear from me. But before you throw this away, consider, our story didn't have to end like this." I nearly laughed at the arrogance. As if our marriage had been some novel he could rewrite with a better ending. His words spiraled from pleading to bitter to strangely nostalgic. He recalled our first date at that terrible sushi place where we both got food poisoning. The way I'd held his hand during his father's funeral. The night we'd painted the nursery sky blue before the miscarriage. Then the tone shifted. "You think you won, but the system rigged this from the start. That bitch Amanda had it out for me, and David always hated me. Even Jasmine turned on me in the end." My stomach turned as I reached the final page. Asterisk, but here's something you don't know. That money I took? The $15,000? I didn't use it for Jasmine. I invested it in a startup. Your brother never checked that lead. By the time I get out, it'll be worth 10 times that. And thanks to our still legal marriage, half is yours. If you visit me, we can, asterisk. The page ended mid-sentence. I flipped it over, but the back was blank. Had he run out of room? Changed his mind? Or, more likely, been interrupted by a guard? The appeal notice was standard boilerplate, but one handwritten note in the margin caught my eye. Habeas corpus hearing scheduled January 12th. Next week. My coffee had gone cold. The hospital intercom announced a code pink, newborn security alert, but I sat frozen, the papers heavy in my lap. Mark was wrong about one thing. I did know about the startup investment. David had discovered it months ago during the asset search. What Mark didn't know was that the company had already folded, its assets sold off to cover debts. His brilliant investment was worthless. I should have felt satisfaction at that. Instead, I just felt tired. The letter ended up in the hospital incinerator, along with contaminated gowns and used surgical drapes. Watching it burn through the small observation window, I realized this was the true end. Not the divorce, not the trial, but this final refusal to play his games. Back in labor and delivery, Diane handed me a chart with raised eyebrows. Everything okay? I tied my fresh scrub gown with steady hands. Better than okay. Room 3's fully dilated. As I pushed into the delivery room, the mother, a young first-timer with her hair in a messy bun, reached for my hand. "I'm scared," she whispered. I squeezed her fingers, the way wiser nurses had once squeezed mine. "You're stronger than you think." The baby came fast, a squalling pink miracle that blinked up at us with ancient, knowing eyes. As I placed her in her mother's arms, something in my chest loosened, the last knot of anger, maybe, or the weight of my own lost motherhood. Later, walking to my car through the snow globe stillness of the parking lot, I pulled out my phone. 2 texts waited, one from David about finalizing the asset division, one from the hospital administrator offering me a permanent position. I replied to the administrator first, honored to accept. The snow crunched underfoot as I reached my car. Somewhere, Mark sat in a cell, plotting appeals and imaginary fortunes. Jasmine prepared for motherhood in Ohio. David worried over legal fine print. And me? I drove home through the quiet streets, past houses glowing with holiday lights, to my little bungalow with its warped floors and peace lily in the window. The future stretched before me, not as the woman Mark had tried to erase, but as someone entirely new. Someone who'd survived fire and come out tempered. As I turned the key in my front door, the winter air carried the distant sound of church bells. Not marking any hour I knew, just ringing, because it was Christmas Eve, and that's what bells do. I stepped inside, leaving the cold and the past behind me. New beginnings. Spring arrived in a rush of cherry blossoms and birdsong. I stood on my bungalow's front porch, sipping coffee as the morning sun painted my overgrown lawn in gold. The for sale sign leaned slightly to the left. I'd have to straighten it before the open house today. My phone buzzed with a text from David. "Last paperwork signed. You're officially free and clear." Attached was a photo of the judge's final order. Mark's appeal denied, all marital assets rightfully distributed. The startup investment had indeed gone bankrupt, just as we'd discovered. I ran my fingers over the screen, tracing the legal seal. 7 years of marriage, a year of heartache, all reduced to a PDF attachment. It should have felt like an ending. Instead, it just felt like morning. Inside, the house smelled of lemon polish and fresh flowers. I'd spent weeks packing, donating Mark's things, carefully boxing my own memories. The yellow armchair would come with me to the new apartment near the hospital. The peace lily, too, though it had grown too large for its pot. The doorbell rang at precisely 10 a.m. My real estate agent, Carol, beamed on the doorstep. Perfect day for selling. She bustled past me, adjusting cushions and opening curtains. "We'll have offers by sunset, just wait." I smiled but said nothing. The truth was, I didn't care if the house sold today or next month. This place had served its purpose. A cocoon when I needed shelter, a launch pad when I was ready to fly. Prospective buyers arrived in steady streams. A young couple envisioning a nursery in the small bedroom. An older woman who admired my garden. A single dad whose toddler immediately claimed the bay window as a fort. It was nearly 4 p.m. when the last visitors left. Carol gushed about multiple promising offers as I walked her out. The spring air carried the scent of my neighbor's freshly cut grass. "You're sure about downsizing?" Carol asked, pausing on the porch. "This is such a family-friendly neighborhood." I looked past her to where the cherry petals swirled in the breeze. "I'm sure." My phone buzzed as I cleaned up the last of the open house snacks, a notification from the hospital. Another birth announcement. I'd stopped counting how many babies I'd helped deliver since taking the permanent position. Dozens at least. Each one a tiny revolution. The final box waited by the door, labeled simply Lisa. Inside were the things that mattered. My grandmother's recipe book, a photo album of college friends, the embroidered handkerchief my mother had given me. Not the one I'd burned, but its twin, discovered last month in an old hope chest. As I lifted the box, something fluttered to the floor, a Polaroid from my nursing school graduation. Younger me grinned beside my parents, my cap slightly askew. On the back, in my father's handwriting, "Whatever comes next, you'll handle it." The sun dipped lower, painting the empty rooms in amber light. I took one last walk through the house, trailing my fingers along the kitchen counter where I'd burned countless grilled cheeses, pausing in the bedroom where I'd both cried and rediscovered sleep. At the bay window, I pressed my palm against the warped sill, feeling the familiar ridge. Then I turned off the lights, locked the door, and carried my box to the car. The Peace Lily Road shotgun, its leaves brushing my arm as I drove away. In the rearview mirror, the for sale sign stood straight now, its bold letters declaring what I already knew. This story was over. The next one waited just ahead. If this story of betrayal and resilience resonated with you, do 3 things right now. First, hit that like button. It helps others find powerful stories like this. Second, subscribe for more inspiring journeys of women reclaiming their power. Finally, comment below with the word strong. Because that's what you are, and you should never forget it.